Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
As a child, one of my favorite games was Clue. It's a board game, and you have to solve a murder mystery by answering 3 questions. Where did the murder happen? Who committed the murder? And how did they do it? I think I liked this game because there were so many questions as a child that I could not answer. But in Clue, I could figure it out. And this week, we get to be detectives to solve the mystery of what happened to the relationship between Abraham and Isaac after the Akedah. If you'd like to follow along, you can open to Genesis chapter 16, verse 13. Because in order to understand the relationship between Isaac and Abraham, we have to go farther back in time than the Akedah, and we need to go to a certain place called Be'er Lachai Roi. So chapter 16, verse 13, we encounter Hagar. Before she was kicked out of her house by Abraham and Sarah, there was an incident that preceded or foreshadowed that exile. When she was pregnant with Ishmael, Sarah was abusive to her, and she ran away. She found a spring in the wilderness, and she settled herself there. God sent an angel to give her a prophecy. And the angel said, "Go home to your family, Hagar. You will bear a son. He will be a great nation. You should go home. All will be well." So she named the place Be'er Lachai Roi, and here is what she said. And she called the Lord who spoke to her. "You are El Roi, the God of seeing," by which she meant, "Have I not gone on seeing after he saw me?" All right, detectives, follow me to chapter 22, verse 3. This is the beginning of the Akedah story, and the sages are very specific in verse 3 to say that Abraham and Isaac set out on the journey together. This was a joint venture. They were close, they were united. So early the next morning, Abraham saddled his ass and took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. But when we get to chapter 22, verse 19, after the Akedah, the words change. Abraham then returned to his servants, and they departed together for Beersheba. So where's Isaac? He's not with Abraham now. Where did he go? Well, now turn to our parsha. Chapter 24, verse 62. Abraham has decided to find Isaac a wife. But Isaac isn't living in Beersheba with Abraham. We're told in chapter 24, verse 62, Isaac had just come back from the vicinity of Be'er Lachai Roi. He had fled to that refuge. And furthermore, we're told in chapter 25, verse 11, shortly after Isaac and Rebekah marry, Abraham dies. And Isaac and his brother Ishmael bury their father. And in chapter 25, verse 11, we're told, after the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac settled near Be'er Lachai Roi. The Torah does not name a place 3 times unless it's trying to call our attention to something. So let's look at the commentaries when this place, this spring, first appears. What do they have to say about Be'er Lachai Roi? What's so magical about this place that it appears 3 times in our text? Rashi says when Hagar names the place, it's an expression of wonderment. She says, "Would I have thought that even in the wilderness I would find the omnipresent?" I think she means God is everywhere, even in the place of my distress. So perhaps Be'er Lachai Roi is a place that reminds us that God sees us, and that even in the most vast wilderness, God sees us suffer, God knows. Ibn Ezra says, rather than focusing on the word Roi, which means sees me, he focuses on the word Lachai, ever living. He says that Hagar was praying that this spring would continue to last for many years to come. In other words, even in a time of suffering, the spring does not dry up. God is always flowing, always present. And then finally, there's the translation in our Tanakh itself. It phrases this naming of the spring as a bit of a question. Have I not gone on seeing God after God saw me? Asks Hagar. She is recognizing her own strength in the face of her suffering. I didn't know I could go on seeing, she says. But now that I know that God sees me, I can go on. So let's apply this wisdom that we've learned about the name of this spring, this oasis, this refuge, Be'er L'chai Ro'i, the well where God lives and sees. Let's apply it back to the story between Abraham and Isaac. This thread of seeing actually starts in the previous parsha, the one that contains the Akedah, Vayera. Already we have in the first words of the parsha the sense of seeing. Vayera means, and God appeared, and God was seen. And when Abraham has the Akedah experience, after he finishes, he names the mountain. He says, this is the place where God sees. On the mount of the Lord, there is vision. So for Abraham, God seeing is a place of might, a place of awe, a place where one's mettle and faith is tested, and he has come through the test. But that was not the experience that Isaac had. Isaac didn't want to be seen by God in that way, and when the whole experience is finished, he can't go home with his father, and he thinks, where should I go? And he remembers perhaps a story that his second mother Hagar told him as a boy, of a place where she once felt seen, where she once felt refuge from her suffering. He remembers Be'er L'chai Ro'i, and he goes to live there perhaps with his second mother and his brother Yishmael. Now, while Abraham is home alone, he starts thinking about his son Isaac and the suffering that he's experienced. And he tries to really see what he can do to help. And he decides that Isaac needs love and nurturing. And he seeks out Rebecca, who is the paradigm of kindness, right? She's the one who can water all of those camels with full energy. But Isaac, too, is trying to see his father, even though they're separated. And we're told that shortly after Isaac marries Rebecca, Abraham marries a woman named Keturah. However, the Midrash says Keturah is not a new person. Keturah is another name for Hagar. Isaac went to Be'er L'chai Ro'i to reunite his family. He knew that his father needed to be seen in his time of suffering too, and also needed nurturing. So he brings Hagar and Ishmael back with him just in time, right? Just in time to bury the old man. Perhaps they've learned from each other what it means to be seen by God in a time of suffering. And perhaps we can extrapolate from this. Going back to the metaphor of the board game of Clue, you have to know where, who, and how. So perhaps the where is a place of our suffering. And perhaps the who is God. God sees. But how does God help? By surrounding us with people who love us and can help us through our suffering. My prayer for us is that if there's anyone in our community suffering, that they know they are seen and surrounded by people who love them and support them. Shabbat Shalom.